نستعين الحمد لله رب العالمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين اهدنا الصراط أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم
بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
So the recitation this evening was a little bit different in that it wasn't necessarily just one riwayah that was being recited. There were multiple riwayat that were recited. So instead of me asking you which riwayah it was, which applications could you that were different from normal?
ضالين.
Okay, correct. There was one Nina. So we didn't cover that yet. We're going to cover that today, inshallah. But based on what we have covered in the previous lessons, especially last week, who do you think that is? Which riwayah or qira'ah? That would be Yaqub. We mentioned last week that Yaqub reads with ha was sakt. Example, wa, hiya, ilayya. So we didn't cover the word Allah, leen, is having the ha was sakt. But based on the fact that there was the ha was sakt, you can identify it as Yaqub. What other application was the?
عليهم.
Alayhum. And again, that on its own, just that word on its own, alayhum, can actually be two different qira'at. But in the notes in the book that we've done, there's only one person that was mentioned as being reading in that way. And that would be whom?
Yaqub.
Again, Yaqub. Okay, so it was Yaqub, mostly that was being recited. Any other application?
قالون.
There was Sila of the Meme at the end, which could have been Qalun or Ibn Kathir or even Abu Ja'far. I think it was possibly Qumbul that was being recited. Okay, any other application?
It was Idgham Kabir. It was Idgham Kabir.
I was going to say Idgham Kabir also, Sheikh.
Yes, there was Idgham Kabir.
Susi.
And Idgham Kabir is for whom?
Susi.
Susi. Okay, so those were some of the riwayat that we recited. Yaqub was there, possibly Qumbul was there, and Susi was there. But there were some applications that you don't find in the Sab'a, nor in the Thalatha, via the Ashara Sughra. That recitation was via the Ashara Kubra. You might have heard Hudan lil Muttaqin. There was Gunna when you read Hudan lil Muttaqin. And that application you won't find at all in the Ashara Sughra. It will be in the Ashara Kubra. And today, inshallah, we're going to look at some of that. So normally the recitation that I play for you is based on what we did in the previous week, and to see whether you're paying attention to the previous week's lesson, whether you learned it correctly. So I'll play the recitation based on that. But since today is the last lesson, and only in this lesson we're going to look at the Ashara Kubra, I played it now at the beginning. But before we get to that, we still have to finish the Ashara Sughra. Again, here we have all the different qira'at and the qurra and the cover of the book. And last week we moved on to the Thalatha, Abu Ja'far, Yaqub, and Khalaf. We did Abu Ja'far, we did Yaqub. So Khalaf al-Ashir, the 10th one, is what is left for today, inshallah. We just mentioned now some of the aspects of Yaqub. Yes, the ha'u sakt, huwa, hiya, ilayya, and so on. Lima, it starts with the ha'u sakt. That's one way of identifying Yaqub. Then you have alayhum, alayhuma, fihum, fihuma. The ha in the pronoun hum and huma, when preceded by a ya sakina, he will read it with a dhamma on its origin. When it's a kasra preceding it, however, he will read it with a kasra. The ha will be read with a kasra like the normal qurradu, bihim. But when it's a ya sakina, then with a dhamma, fihum, ilayhum, alayhum. And there was one other aspect of Yaqub's recitation that we looked at in order to be able to identify his recitation? Anybody can recall? There was one other application that Yaqub has through which you can identify his recitation. Mahmouda?
Is it with the E, Sheikh? With the
It is
omitted?
the Ya that is omitted. The Ya'at al-Zawaid is not the only one that reads them, but he has the most extensive application of that. So fattaquni with a kasra, you will read fattaquni. Farhabuni, you will read farhabuni. You will do that both waqfan and maslan, reading through and stopping on those particular words. Then we looked at Abu Ja'far as well before that. Abu Ja'far comes before Yaqub in a sequence. How did we look at being able to identify Abu Ja'far? There were two things we looked at.
Abu Ja'far هيت إخفاء أن غين أن خاء.
Correct.
Instead of
Ikhfa in the ghain and the kha instead of ilfar, correct? So that's the easiest way of identifying Abu Ja'far. Somebody else? What other application did we have for Abu Ja'far? Somebody else?
سقط الحروف المقطعة.
You will have sucked in the huruf al-muqatta'at. Okay, so that one will only obviously when the recitation is at the beginning of the surah. And that's why the other one is the other aspect that you have to look out for. So those were his two unique applications. And we looked at another way of identifying Abu Ja'far based on his usul. It's not specific to him, these particular applications, but when you combine them, then it becomes specific to Abu Ja'far. Yes, Mahmoud?
الصلة of the mim al-jam' and ibdal of the hamzat.
Correct. Those two coming together will only be Abu Ja'far. If you have Sila of the Mim al-Jam from the Saba'a, it's Qalun or Ibn Kathir. Then looking at the Ashra, Abu Ja'far will join them. Then again, looking at the Saba'a, you have Ibdal of the Hamza, which is only Susi. But then looking at the Ashra, then it is Abu Ja'far. So those two coming together will only be Abu Ja'far. Because if we have the Ibdal, then Ibn Kathir and Qalun are excluded. And if you have the Sila, then Susi is excluded. So moving now on to Khalaf al-Ashir. Remember, he is the same Rawi of Hamza. Hamza has Khalaf and Khalad as his two Ruwat. So in that reading, Khalaf simply transmits what he learned from Hamza via Sulaim. In his reading, however, his qira'ah, he makes his own ikhtiyar. He has his own choice in terms of applications that he applies in his recitation of the Quran. So now becomes a qari in his own right, with his own ruwat underneath him. The ruwat of Khalaf are whom?
As Idris and Ishaq.
Ishaq and Idris. Okay, correct. Ishaq and Idris in that particular sequence. So interestingly, Khalaf, out of all the 10 Qurra, remember we firstly looked at the unique applications. We looked at the singular applications as an easy way of identifying a particular qira'ah. So Susi has Idgham Kabir only by the Saba'a. Warush is the only one that has Mad Badal. Ibn Amir, Isham is the only one that reads Ibrahim ibn Dakwan in Surah Al-Baqarah. So just by looking at that one application, you identified, okay, that's the particular qira'ah. Then we looked at the combined applications. Okay, we will narrow it down to a particular one or two or maybe three of the Qurra. So Khalaf al-Ashir is going to be a bit more interesting in how you're going to have to identify him because he has no unique applications. He has no recitations that are unique to him, neither in the usul nor in the farsh. We saw that for those that have the same usul as Hafs, we looked at the farshi changes to see how he reads differently, uniquely, so that we can identify them. So Shu'bah, for example, is the only one that reads Rule 1. So Khalaf doesn't have anything that singles him out. He has no unique applications, and he is from Kufa. So who are the other Kufan Qurra? Who are the Kufan Qurra? The Qadis from Kufa.
عاصم حمزة الكسائي.
Correct. And we said that he is the Rawi of Hamza, right? by an intermediary, Sulaim. So his recitation will be very similar to Hamza and Kisai. His recitation will be most similar to that of Hamza and Al-Kisai, both in the usul and in the farsh. Most of the farshi changes, he will read the same as Hamza and as Al-Kisai, or at least one of them. And if not, then he will read the same as Asim. So what application do you have for Hamza and Kisai? What application do both of them have? Which application do they share?
Hamza and Kisai على شيء مسنود
إمالة شيخ.
تواتر يا
They have imala.
تواتر
Right? Just generally speaking, they have imala. So that is what we're going to start off by looking for in trying to identify khalaf. We're going to look at the imala. So before we go into today's lesson for khalaf, we're just quickly going to go back and revise the imala. We're going to go to the chapter that we did on imala. So we have the different categories. The first one was the ta marbuta, which we did in the chapter on the single applications. That's only for Kisai. And here we're looking at the combined applications. You have the watul ya, those words ending in a ya. Istawi, hudihum, when reading with imala. Then you have the second category, the watul ra. Before the alif maqsura, there is a ra. So bushri, ishtarihu, with the imala. Then we have the ra mutatarrifa maksura. The ra coming at the end of the word, it has a kasra. So an-niri, absirihim. That's how it will be read with the imala. So you have those three categories, and here was the applications, right? So looking at the individual qurra, we have Hamza having imala in the watul ya as well as in the watul ra, but not in the ra maksura. But not in the ra maksura, only in the first two categories. Then we have Kisai having in the watul ya, the watul ra, and his first rawi is Abu al-Harith, right? The first block here is for Abu al-Harith, and he will not have imala in the ra maksura. So Abu al-Harith is the same as Kisai in terms of how he reads with imala. Abu al-Harith, the first rawi of Kisai, reads the same as the entire Hamza in the application of imala. So how can we separate them? How can we separate Abu al-Harith from Hamza? What other application can we look for to separate them?
مدود.
Madud, how will it differ in the application of mad?
أبو الحارث توسط حمزة طول.
Hamza will have two. Okay, so if you add these imalat with two, then it's Hamza. If you add it with tawassut, then it will be Kisai. You know, the second rawi of Kisai, which is Duri, will have the watul ya, the watul ra, as well as the ra maksura in all three categories. And remember, it's not mentioned here because here we're looking at combined applications, but under imala, we also have the ta marbuta. We also have the ta marbuta, and that will only be for Kisai. For both Abu al-Harith and Duri, they will also have imala in the ta marbuta. So if you include that column, if you have another column there for ta marbuta, then Hamza will have 2 out of 4. Abu al-Harith will have 3 out of 4. Duri Kisai will have all 4. Duri Kisai will have all 4. And then we have the watul ya not being applied for Abu Amr, only the watul ra and the ra maksura. So when you have the ra included in the word, then Abu Amr will make the imala kubra, the watul ra, the ra maksura. And again, if you include the ta marbuta, you'll only have 2 out of 4. You'll have the watul ra and the ra maksura. So that's what we need to have in mind, right? In terms of how the Qur'an apply imala. And now we're going to compare and see how does Khalaf al-Ashir apply the imala. As I mentioned at the beginning, that qira'ah of Khalaf al-Ashir has no applications at all. No applications at all that are unique to it. which kind of paradoxically makes that its unique feature. The fact that it is nothing that separates it from any of the other qira'at is what makes Khalaf al-Ashir stand out from the rest. In its usul, it is essentially the same as that of Kisa'i by Abu al-Harith. So in terms of the length of mad, they both have tawassut in the mudud. They will both read with 4 harakat. You know the different categories of imala that we just looked at now, the watul ya, the watul ra maksura, mutadarrifa, and the ta marbuta. So Khalaf al-Ashir, he will have imala in the watul ya and the watul ra, the first 2. And if you can just bring to mind that table I showed you now, you can see that was the same as Abu al-Harith. Abu al-Harith had imala in the watul ya and the watul ra, but not in the ra maksura, mutadarrifa. But what will now separate him is that obviously Abu al-Harith is the Rawi of Kisa'i, and we know that Kisa'i has imala in the ta marbuta, and that is unique to Kisa'i. It's unique to him by the entire Ashra Suhra. So when stopping on it, he will have imala in the ta marbuta, while Khalaf will have fath. So that's how you can identify them. Lesson 4, tawassut in the mad, and imala in both the watul ya and the watul ra. That will narrow it down to Abu al-Harith or to Khalaf al-Ashir. And then how do you separate them? You now look for the ta marbuta. If there is imala in it, then it will be Abu al-Harith. If there is no imala in the ta marbuta, then it will be Khalaf al-Ashir. So that distinction is how qira'ah of Khalaf will be identified. You need to look for tawassut in the mad, imala in the watul ya, as well as in the watul ra, but then fath in the ta marbuta. That's the one way of looking at it. That's the one way of trying to identify the riwayah or the qira'ah rather of Khalaf al-Ashir. Then another difference is that Khalaf has imala in ja'a and sha'a, while Abu al-Harith will have fath. Imala for Khalaf al-Ashir in the words ja'a, so you will read ja'a, and sha'a you will read shi'a, obviously with a mad. So ja'a, shi'a, to the length of what? To what length will you pull that mad? Khalaf al-Ashir will pull that mad. How long? 2, 4, 6 harakat.
Tawassut.
4, he'll have tawassut. Okay. Abu al-Harith will also have tawassut, but he will have fath. So here the note that we have is simply comparing between Abu al-Harith and Khalaf al-Ashir. Right? Comparing, seeing the differences between Abu al-Harith and Khalaf al-Ashir. Why? Because we first going to listen for the watul ya and the watul ra. And here that he has imala in that. So now we've narrowed it down to those 2. Now we're looking at how to separate them. If you consider all the 10 qira'at, and then we mentioned this before in the book, that Khalaf al-Ashir won't be the only one to have imala in ja'a and in sha'a. Who else has imala in those 2 words that we mentioned in this book?
Ibn Amir.
Not the entire Ibn Amir. Not the entire Ibn Amir.
Ibn Dakwan.
Ibn Dakwan. We use that as one of the ways to identify Ibn Dakwan, looking at imala in ja'a and sha'a. But then we said that you must hear that with tawassut, because Hamza will also have imala in ja'a and sha'a, but he will read with tul. Okay, so just looking at the word ja'a and sha'a on its own is not enough to identify Khalaf. You can narrow it down now to Khalaf al-Ashir, or to Ibn Dakwan, or to Hamza. Then you can separate Hamza from them by listening for the mad. If it's tul, then it is Hamza. If it's not tul, then it will either be Ibn Dakwan or Khalaf al-Ashir. And then if you hear the imala in the watul ya, the watul ra, then it will be Khalaf, because Ibn Dakwan will not have imala in that. Ibn Dakwan will read with fath in those particular words. And as I said, here the note is just to separate Khalaf from Abu al-Harith. So Khalaf will have imala in those 2 words. Abu al-Harith will have fath. And again, very interestingly, we saw that in this section of the book, the 3 qira'at, we're not so interested in identifying the individual riwayat. We're looking only at the qira'ah, how to identify Abu Ja'far, how to identify Yaqub. But I did mention 1 or 2 points in the notes, just for the sake of interest of how to separate between the 2 rawis of Abu Ja'far and of Yaqub. For Abu Ja'far, we said that there will be naql in the word al-ana for Ibn Wardan, but not for Ibn Jammaz. For Yaqub, we said that Ruwais will read the word sirat with a sin. And if you listen closely to the recitation at the beginning, it was read with the sin. So it was Ruwais that was being recited. Then we also said that you have the word kafirin, which will be read with imala by Ruwais, but not by Rawh. So for Khalaf al-Ashir, looking at the Ashara Surah, and there are no differences between his two rawis. Between Ishaq and Idris, there's no way at all that you can separate them. They will read exactly the same. If you expand to include the Ashara Kubra, then there is a way of separating them, identifying each one separately. There's just a footnote here that I must add, that both Abu al-Harith as well as Khalaf al-Ashir, they will have imala in the Batul Ya and the Batul Ra, and they will both have Fath in the Ra Maksura. They will both have Fath in the Ra Maksura Mutatarrifa. So a little bit complicated, because there's no unique applications that will make it very easy to identify Khalaf, right? You have to now listen for the imalas and listen for the lengths of the mad. So here's a comparison between the two, Abu al-Harith and Khalaf. Abu al-Harith will have the Batul Ya, Khalaf will have the same. Abu al-Harith will have Iman in the Batul Ra, Khalaf will have the same. And here they are now separated. Looking at the Ta Marbuta, if you hear that with Imala, stopping on it, it will be Abu al-Harith. If it's read with Fath, then it will be Khalaf. If you don't hear in the recitation the Ta Marbuta, you look for the word Sha'a and Sha'a. If they read with Fath, then it will be Abu al-Harith. And if it's read with Imala, then it will be Khalaf. Remember, they will both be with Tawassut. The mad will be with Tawassut. So if you have Tool, then it will be Hamza. Hamza will have some of these Imalas over here, but with Tool. Ibn Dhakwan will have Imala in Ja'a and Sha'a, but not in the other words, not in the other categories. That's what you need to look out for. For Khalaf al-Ashir, Imala in the Batul Ya, in the Batul Ra, Fath in the Ta Marbuta, and Imala in Ja'a and in Sha'a. So this lesson, as you can see, a bit different. There's no exercise where I give you the verses and then you have to highlight it and look for applications in it. Why? Because it will be very hard to find all of this just within one verse. We'll have to look at multiple verses in order to have all of these different applications. And then listening to all those different applications, you need to filter it out, right? Try and look for the particular combination that will result in it being Khalaf al-Ashir. And also over here, we're gonna just assume that it's gonna either be Abu al-Harith or Khalaf. I just want to hear the differences between them. We just want to hear the differences between Abu al-Harith and the Qira'ah of Khalaf al-Ashir. So I'm going to read Surah Al-Qari'ah, inshaAllah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم القارعة ما القارعة وما أدريك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدريك ما هي نار حامية. So what was the difference here in the recitation of Khalaf al-Ashir and Abu al-Harith? I read here now, obviously for Khalaf al-Ashir. If I had to have been reading for Abu al-Harith, what would have been different in that particular surah?
Ta Marbuta.
There would have been the imana in the Ta Marbuta. So فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ would have been هَاوِيَةٌ. So the fact that I did with Fath over there makes it Khalaf. If it had been Abu al-Harith, they would have had to have been imala in that particular word. And the differences in Surah Bayyinah and Balad are going to be very similar. Okay, so we'll just leave it here to Surah Al-Qari'ah. You can use the application over here if you want to listen to the recitation of those two surah. Just a point that you need to take note of over here, that recitation that I did now for Khalaf al-Ashir, reading in that particular way was not unique to him. There are other Qur'an that would have read exactly the same as how he read that particular surah. Okay, but as we said here in this particular exercise, we're just looking at how to separate Khalaf from Abu al-Harith. So that recitation of Surah Qari'ah, it was not unique to Khalaf al-Ashir. The one where it will be unique to him is where you're going to have Imala in the Batul Ya, the Batul Ra, and then Imala in Ja'a and Sha'a. If you hear all of those three Imalas, or maybe two of them, Sha'a with one of these other two, or Sha'a with one of these other two, that will be something specific to Khalaf al-Ashir. Are there any questions on this before we go on?
The other Qari or the other Rawi, would it be Shu'bah? So,
Shu'bah will have read the same as how I did now. Surah Al-Qari'ah, even Dhakwan would have read the same. Okay, because the word adaraka, it's a specific particular word in terms of the ma'ana. It's not like the normal Dawatul Ra. Shu'bah doesn't have normally imala in the Dawatul Ra, but in that particular word, he will have imala. Ibn Dhakwan also will have imala in that particular word, adaraka. Any other questions? So we've already covered the division of Abu Ja'far and Yaqub. So just the usul of Khalaf al-Ashir. You'll have tawassut in the mad munfasil. You'll have tawassut in the mad muttasil. In terms of his imalas, you'll have imala in the Batul Ya as well as in the Batul Ra. And the consistent farfi change for him will be imala in the words Ja'a and in Sha'a. And there's no way, as we said, to separate between Ishaq and Idris in the Ashra Sughra. So now moving on, subhanAllah, to the Ashra Kubra. So generally when I was writing this book, I thought I'm only going to look at the Sab'ah. I was thinking to maybe just restrict ourselves to looking at the Sab'ah, but then I thought, okay, let's just maybe add the other three and make the book a bit more comprehensive but hopefully a bit more beneficial. And then I was going to leave it at that. But then again, since we are currently doing now with Salim, alhamdulillah, the Ashra Kubra, and we've been now exposed to some of the changes within that. Again, just for the sake of completeness, I thought to include this as well. But this particular chapter, I think, will be of interest mostly to those that have done Qira'at already, that have done the Ashra Sughra, but have not yet done the Ashra Kubra. I think they will have the best understanding of this particular chapter, and for them it will be of most interest, inshallah. Also, if you maybe done some individual riwayat or Qira'at, but maybe not necessarily all of them, then again, by having that understanding of Qira'at, again, yeah, this particular section, I think, should be quite interesting, inshallah. If you are those people that haven't done Qira'at at all, and this is your first exposure through this course to doing Qira'at, then some of this might be a bit overwhelming, a bit much. And therefore, in terms of my expectation of what you need to know from the book, you don't really need to know this particular chapter. As I said, after today, the last lesson, there's going to be a quiz, but you don't need to know this particular chapter. The difference is in the Ashra Kubra. You do need to know what we just did now, the chapter on Khalaf al-Ashir. So what's the difference between the Sughra and the Kubra? We've been using those terms quite frequently. And we mentioned it way back at the beginning of the course, so just to go over it again, that when you study the Qira'at, you first study it by the text of the Shatibiyya, Hiruzul Amani Wajhut Tahani. That's the full name and the proper name of the poem, commonly known as the Shatibiyya, written by Imam Shatibi. So in that we do the Sab'ah. In that poem, we learn the rules of the Sab'ah, the 7 Qira'at. Then to complete the 10, we do the Durra by Ibn al-Jazari, Imam Ibn al-Jazari, and that will give you 10. 7 plus 3 will give you 10, the minor 10 Qira'at. So why is it called the Sughra, the minor 10? Because each riwayah is read according to only one tariq. Again, at the beginning, we had that presentation where we show you all the chain of narration. It was revealed by Allah Ta'ala to Jibreel alayhi salam, who brought it down to the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who recited it to the Sahaba radiallahu an, passed it on to the Tabi'un, and within the Tabi'un, we have some of the Qurra and the remainder in the Taba'at Tabi'un. But the chain of narration doesn't stop at the Taba'at Tabi'un. It goes on. It's passed on to the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, and so on. So we have the Qari, then below the Qari, we have the Rawi. And then everybody in the chain of narration below that will now be a tariq. Each one will be a tariq. So we have Hafs and Asim. Asim is the Qari, Hafs is the Rawi. But obviously it was transmitted to us. We now didn't go into the way of Hafs. So somebody had to be a student of Hafs to pass it on from him. And that student had another student who passed it on from him. So all of those students below Hafs in the chain, each one is called a tariq. There are 4 primary turuq. 4 primary ones that learned from the Rawi, either directly or indirectly. And then from those 4, there will be multiple secondary turuq. So when you're doing by the Shaltubiyya, you're only going through one tariq. You see there are 4 primary turuq for Hafs, you're only reading through one of them. Within that one primary tariq, there are multiple, there are many secondary turuq. And again, by the Shaltubiyya, you're reading only via one. So when you do the Ashra Kubra, you don't just do via that one of those 4 primary turuq, you do all 4. You do all 4. And for each of those 4, you do it via all of the secondary turuq. So does anybody know for Hafs, how many turuq in total are they? Looking at the secondary turuq. There's 4 primary. Each of those 4 primary has multiple secondary. How many secondary turuq will there be in total? Anybody want to take a guess?
52.
57.
There will be 52.
52.
And there's some ulama that add another 5 to bring it up to 57. Subhanallah. So looking at 57 different turuq, different ways of recitation, just for one rawi. Just for one rawi, just for Hafs. And if you consider all of those different ways of reading now for Shu'bah, for Qalun, for Warsh, it's going to get to a lot. It's going to get to almost 1,000. فهو 1000. طيبة, Imam Shatibi says it's approximately around about 1,000 secondary turuq. Okay, can you refer to my other book on the turuq of Imam Hafs for explanation of this particular concept? So when you study the 10 qira'at by the Tayyiba of Imam Ibn al-Jazari, this is known as the Ashra Kubra, the major 10 qira'at, because each riwayah is read according to multiple turuq. Each riwayah is being read according to multiple turuq. Small is in there. So there's a lot of overlap. Okay, so that doesn't mean that there's now 50 different ways of reading for Hafs, and each of those 50 different ways will be read differently. Okay, there will be certain applications within some of those turuq that will be different from the others. Okay, so due to the multiplicity of turuq, there are plethora of additional awjuh found in the Kubra that are not present in the Sughra, and we call those the ziyadat al-tayyibah. The ziyadat al-tayyibah. Okay, additional awjuh are called the ziyadat al-tayyibah, those that are additionally found in the tayyibah that are not found in the Shatibiyah and the Durra. And again, we had an example of that in the recitation at the beginning of the class. Who was the reciter? Anybody know who the reciter was? The recording played at the beginning of the list. Jakut?
Yes, maybe.
It's Nashal, so as my teacher, one of my teachers, on Salim. They did Hudan lil Muttaqin. They did with Hunna in the Lam. Hunna in the Lam, you will not find in the Ashra Sughra. You'll only find it in the Ashra Kubra. So that's an example of the Ziyadatul Tayyibah. It's one of the additional ways of reading that you find in the Tayyibah. It's not present in the Shatibiyah, not present in the Durra. So in this section, the intent is not to link the applications mentioned to a particular qari or rawi, like we did before. Looked at this application, it goes to this particular qari, it goes to this particular rawi. With this particular application, it goes not just to one qari or rawi, but to multiple, to maybe 2 or 3 of them, right? What we're looking over here is to simply say, okay, this one is via the sughra, this application is via the kubra. This application is additional. You only find it in the kubra, you don't find it in the sughra. So that's all we're looking at, right? Looking at what is the application that you will find specifically only in the kubra and you don't find in the sughra. But if a particular variation is applied by only one qari or rawi, then his name will be mentioned, but I'll mention it in the footnotes so that the note doesn't become, as I said, too overwhelming. So if you hear any of the following applications, then you must know that the recitation is according to the kubra and not the sughra. And the very first point here is the one that I just mentioned now. If you have a idgham of the nun sakin and tanween being made with ghunna, the letters lam and also the ra, then it will be via the ashra kubra. So for Hafs, you will read min ladun min rabbihim. And via all of the 10 qira'at, via the sughra, they will all read the same. They will all read exactly the same. Looking at the multiple turuk, however, looking at the ashra kubra, then you can have min ladun min rabbihim. The ghunna will be present in the idgham. So idgham with ghunna in the lam and the ra. Then in the ashra sughra, who makes sakta? Who is with sakta?
Hamza.
Hamza. And what does he have in terms of the mad?
Tul.
Yes, tul. So sakta will always be with tul because it's only Hamza that reads in it, and he has those 2 applications. Looking at the ashra kubra, you will hear sometimes sak being made with tawassut. Sak being made with tawassut in the mudud. So sak being made not by Hamza, because Hamza by the ashra sughra and by the kubra, he will still always have tul. He's the only one, subhanAllah, that will always only have tul. Warsh has tul by the sughra, but by the kubra he has other variations in terms of the mad. But Hamza will only have tul. So there will other, in the ashra kubra, there will be other Quran qira'at that will read with sakta as well. And it's not just one, there's more than one. And that's why there's no footnote for that particular point. If you have sak being made within a single word other than shay, then this is also via the ashra kubra. So Hamza will read shay'un, shay'an, right? But in other words, you will read Quran, wa yan'awna. If you are sucked in these words, then it's via the ashra kubra. Quran, wa yan'awna. Sucked within a single word will only be by the ashra kubra. Why do we make the sucked? Why does Hamza make the sucked on the sakin letter before the Hamza? In order to secure the correct pronunciation of the Hamza. Qad aflaha makes a sakta before the Hamza so that you can easily recite the Hamza correctly. As we said, the Qurra considered as a difficult letter to pronounce. So why is the Hamza a cause of mad? For the same reason. You read Ja'a with mad, Bima unzila with mad, extending the sound of the letter of mad so that you can easily afterwards recite the Hamza correctly. And therefore, via the Ashra Sughra, here there is a sakin letter, the I sakin. It is followed by a Hamza. But Hamza will not have sakta over there. Even though in Qada, Aflaha, Khalaf will have sakta. It's the same thing. Qada, the sakin, then you have the Hamza. Ya bani, the sakin, then the Hamza afterwards. The difference is that here, the ya bani, the letter that is sakin is the letter of mad. And therefore we'll make mad, and because it's making mad, and to the length of tul as well, now it doesn't need a sakta to get the pronunciation correct, because the mad is already present. So we'll read Ya Bani Israel. But via the Ashara Kubra, despite the fact that the mad is going to be made, we will still make additionally the sakta as well. We will make the sakta as well. And it can be both in the munfasil and even in the muttasil. It could be in the munfasil only, or it could be both the munfasil and the muttasil. But you can't have it in the muttasil without the munfasil. So we'll read Ya Bani Israel. Actually, I have to read through because when you stop, there will be other changes. And that will be the example of the sakt in the munfasil, but not the muttasil. In both, it will be Ya Bani إسرائيل اذكروا. So sakta in the letters of mad. If you hear that, it's by the kubra. Then if you hear no sakt being made with tool in the mudud and no ghunna in the ya and the wow. No sakt being made with tool in the mudud and no ghunna in the ya and the wow. Remember that we said that sakta will only be made for hamza by the ashra sughra. So it has to be made with tool. So if you hear those applications and they're not going together, then it will be via the ashra kubra. Then we have ghunna in the ya and the wa. Who is with the ghunna in the ya and the wa?
خلف.
Khalaf. Okay. So when you hear no ghunna in the ya and the wa, then it will be khalaf and hamza. Okay. So if you hear two in the mudud without the ghunna in the ya and the wa, then it will be by the ashra kubra. Then we have certain qurra that apply qasr in mad munfasil. Okay, we did this in the book. Which of the qurra apply qasr in mad munfasil?
قالوا ابن كثير دوري and Susi.
So the first three qurra except Warsh. So we have Qalun, Ibn Kathir, and Abu Amr, Duri and Susi. So an interesting application that we'll find in the Kubra is that you'll have the recitation with qasr, right? With qasr in the mad munfasil. But then specifically when you come to the phrase La ilaha, so you have La, is the alif, which is letter of mad. It's followed by the hamza in a separate word, so it's a mad munfasil. So they deal with qasr in mad munfasil. So qasr should be applied over here since it's a mad munfasil. However, in this particular phrase, they will now apply tawassut instead. Why only in this phrase? Because it is referring to the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illa ant, la ilaha illahu. So to magnify and to emphasize and to draw attention to the tawheed and the unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they make that particular mad different from the other mad. Subhanallah, it's quite a beautiful application. So they have qasr in the normal mad munfasil, but specifically in the phrase la ilaha, then they draw attention to that by making mad there to the length of tawassut. This is known as maddu ta'zim, the mad of grandeur. Why? To, as I said, to draw attention to the grandeur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to magnify that particular point. Then you have tawassut, something similar, being made in the la an-nafiya lil jins. And so you need to know a little bit of Arabic. The la an-nafiya lil jins is the la which negates an entire category. And in terms of the nahu, the grammar, the word that is being made an exception will now become mansub, will take a fatha. La raiba. Why is it la raiba, not la raibun? Is because that la is not just any la, it's not just any negation. It is a negation that completely negates the entire jins, the entire species. So no doubt at all. Not just no doubt, but it's emphasized a lot. No doubt at all. La raiba. There's a difference between la raibun, la raiba, just in terms of a simple translation. La raibun, no doubt. La raiba, no doubt at all. A much more emphatic negation. So again, to draw attention to that emphatic negation, instead of just la raiba, it would be la raiba, la maraddala, la bay'a. So if the word la is followed by a word that is mansub, it's the la nafiya lil jins, then there will be mad applied in that. That mad is known as mad tabri'a, and that is applied only by hamza. That is applied only by hamza. Yeah, that mad is ma'nawi. The cause of that mad is ma'nawi. It's according to the meaning. In the other examples, mad munfasil, mad muttasil, it is lafzi. It's because of the hamza. You have a letter of mad followed by hamza in one word, muttasil. Letter of mad followed by hamza in a separate word, munfasil. The hamza is the cause of the mad. To ease and get the pronunciation of the hamza correct, that's why we make the mad. Here there's no hamza, right? So it's not lafzi, it's not pronunciation. It is due to the meaning. It is ma'nawi. Then you have imala being made in a ta marbuta, but with tool in the mudud. We know that إمالة نتاع مربوطة is read by whom?
كسائي.
By كسائي. And what does كسائي have in the mud? In the mudud?
توسط.
You will have tawassut. Okay, so when you get with tool, now it's not kisai, because by the ashra kubra, kisai doesn't have tool. You will still have only tawassut. Okay, so yet will be applied via a different riwayah, different qira'ah. It will again be hamza. Hamza will have imana nata marbuta as well. But again, that will be via the ashra kubra. Then you have naql. There's a question here, would the la for the first also be nafiya lil jins? What do you mean the la of the first? The first what? Oh, the word of la ilaha. Yes, that would also be la nafiya lil jins. Okay, but over here there will be two mududs coming together. La ilaha is mad munfasil. Then la ilaha is also mad tabri'a. It's also mad tabri'a. So how do you know which one to apply? The munfasil or the mad tabri'a? We see the difference between the two is one is lafzi, the other one is ma'nawi. So the lafzi is stronger. So we'll apply it as a mad munfasil, and the mad tabri'a is only via hamza. Only via hamza. So you'll rather lead with tool over there and put it 6 harakat looking at the mad munfasil. You want to apply 4 harakat looking at the mad tabri'a. But yes, technically it will fall under mad tabri'a as well, since it is la nafiya lil jins. There's something else I can mention over here, but it will be a bit too complicated, so we'll leave that out for now, inshallah. Yeah, we're busy with naql over here. What is with naql?
Warsh.
Warsh. And what does warsh have in terms of the mud?
طول.
Warsh will have 2, 6 harakat. Okay, so when your naql be made with qasr or tawassut in the mudud, then it's via the ashra kubra. It will again still be warsh. It will be warsh that will be making the naql, but via either turuk, you will not have tool, you will have qasr, or you can have tawassut. And that will be via asbahani. There are 2 primary turuk that separate from warsh, al-azraq and al-asbahani. Azraq and asbahani. Asbahani. The recitation of warsh that we have looked at in this book and in the Shaltubiyya and the Sukhra is azraq. So that's why somebody mentioned it earlier in the course, that when you're using an application that I've included here in the book to listen to the riwayah of warsh, you must choose the option that's given there of azraq. You must choose the option of azraq. Asbahani will have different applications. So you will have qasr or tawassut in the mud. You will not have tool in the mud. Asbahani. And have idgham of the nun sakin and tanween being made with ghunna in the waw and without ghunna in the ya. Who reads without ghunna in both of them? Who reads without ghunna? Khalaf and Hamza, right? So we have an interesting application where it is done with ghunna in the one, in the waw, but without ghunna in the other one, in the ya. This will not be Hamza. This will not be Hamza. It will not be Khalaf that does this. This will be Kisa'i. It will be Kisa'i, specifically Duri Kisa'i, and the specific tariq through which this is applied is al-Darir. It is al-Darir. Abu Uthman al-Darir. That's the tariq through which Duri Kisa'i will apply this. Do you have a question, Mahmoud? Hand is up.
No, no, no. No, Sheikh. Shukran.
The next point, Ibdal of the Hamza Sakina being made without idgham kabir and without sila. Looking at what you did for the Ashra Sughra. Who does Ibdal of the Hamza Sakina?
Susi.
Susi. And what application will go with that with Susi will be idgham kabir. By the Ashra Sughra, Susi will have those two going together. And then who else has the Hamza Sakina? Ibdal of it? Yes.
Abu Ja'far, Sheikh.
Abu Ja'far. Abu Ja'far. So again, by the Ashra Sughra, if you have the Hamza Sakina, then if there's no idgham kabir, but you come across a meme, then it will be sila of the meme. So the one will be Susi, the other one will be Abu Ja'far. But by the Ashra Kubra, you can have ibdal of the Hamza Sakina being made without idgham kabir and without sila. That can be for Susi, or it could be for Duri. Okay. Ibdal of the Hamza Sakina being made with tawassut in the mudud. Again, Hamza Sakina, ibdal of it by both Susi and Abu Ja'far. They both have qasr. Right? But here you can have tawassut. It won't be for Abu Ja'far, it will be for Susi. It will be for Susi or for Duri. You have idgham kabir being made with tawassut in the mudud. Idgham kabir being made with tawassut in the mudud. So again at the recitation you had at the beginning, Qari Salim read Ar-Rahim Malik. Then you read Ar-Rahim Malik. So Ar-Rahim Malik, that is for Susi or for Abu Amr, for the entire Abu Amr, looking at the Ashra Kubra. And then Yaqub reads Malik. So Yaqub can also have idgham kabir. It's a unique application only by the Ashra Sughra. For Susi, which is a unique application for him, but that is only by the Ashra Sughra. Expanding to look at the Ashra Kubra, Yaqub can also have idgham kabir. Then Yaqub normally makes qasr in the mad munfasil. That's why the Ashra Sughra. By the Ashra Kubra, he also has an option of tawassut. So you can have that option of tawassut with the idgham kabir, and then that can be Yaqub. Then you can also have idgham kabir being made with tahqiq of the Hamza Sakina. We know that Susi reads with ibda'. And when you do idgham kabir, it must be done with the ibda'. Even by the Ashra Kubra, Susi will have those two going together. Duri as well. Duri basad idgham kabir with ibda' of the Hamza Sakina. So if you have the idgham kabir with the tahqiq, then that will be Yaqub. Then here's the application that we heard now again, and some people were asking about this. You have stopping with the ha'usat on the jam mudhakkar salim. Jam, the plural, mudhakkar, masculine, salim, the sound, masculine, plural. So those of you that know your Arabic, the una or ana, or sorry, ina at the end. Muslimun, muslimin, mu'minun, mu'minin. So every single word that is jam mudhakkar salim, every single word, when stopping on it, for Yaqub, you will have an option of reading with the ha'usat. So very nice application. قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون. So in that particular reading, then that application of the ha'usat becomes much more prevalent in the recitation. So last week we had the lesson on Yaqub, and then again we had the application that I referred you to listen to the particular qira'ah. And so somebody actually did that, and he listened to the recitation from that website, and then he noticed that there was actually this application. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ or قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Okay, so the recitations they were according to the Ashra Kubra. They were doing ha'usat on the jam mudhakkar salim. So that will be for Yaqub, but via the Kubra, not via the Sughra. Okay, so these points over here are just a few, right? They were just some of them that came to mind as I was thinking. There's possibly many others that could be added over here, right? But the point is not to be exhaustive and to cover everything, because as I said, there are many applications that are ziyadatu tayyiba, that are additional in the tayyiba, you don't find in the Sughra. I just wanted to highlight some of the more common ones in this particular note. Then lastly, it is fairly common to hear the riwayah of Hafs being read with qasr being applied in the mad munfasil. Qasr being applied in the mad munfasil. This is also called the Ashra Kubra. Right, so here are recitations, and it's the recitation of Hafs, but you hear them reading with qasr in the mad munfasil. Doesn't mean it's a mistake, right? You hear this quite common from Tarawih recitations from the Haram. Right, if you listen to those particular recitations, because it's Tarawih, they want to make the khatam a bit easy in terms of the length of time, so they read with qasr in the mad munfasil, and they're reading just for Hafs. So there's no other difficult farshi changes to bear in mind. So that is also via the Ashra Kubra, right? So you will hear that quite often. It's fairly common to hear that, but it's via the Ashra Kubra. So somebody was asking about that. Hopefully that now clarifies that it's not a mistake in the recitation, it's just via the Ashra Kubra. And it's a very nice way to learn. Those of you that are huffaz, you obviously need to always keep up with your recitation, keep up with your revision with your door. And I would encourage everybody to try and learn at least this. Try and at least learn this particular way of reading for Hafs with Qasr, so that it just makes it easier for you to do your revision. Now that I've learned this, I only read basically for Hafs with Qasr most of the time, just to make the recitation easier in terms of covering it quickly. Yes, there will be other changes that will go with it as well, but they will be minor. They will be mostly Farsi changes, not the Usuli ones. Right? And again, I've written a book on this that you can refer to if you're interested for more details, inshallah. Ikram, you have a question?
Is the one she referring to via Misbah?
Not only the Misbah, there's also the Rawdah Mu'addal. Those two turuk, but yeah, it would be preferable to read via the Misbah. Because the Rawdah of Mu'addal is not one of the 52 that was selected by Ibn al-Jazari. It's one of the 5 that were added by later scholars. So that's why it would be better to read from the Misbah, because that is one of the turuk selected by Ibn al-Jazari. For those of you that are clued up on what all of that actually means. So subhanAllah, that's actually the end of the course and the end of the book. But before we end, there's a bonus that we have for tonight, alhamdulillah. That we started this particular course obviously by looking at who the different Qurra were. Nafi', Ibn Kathir, and all of the Rawis and so on, going through the 10 different Qurra and the 20 different Ruwat. And I'd written a poem to hopefully make it a bit easier for you to learn that. And alhamdulillah, some people have actually memorized that. So the fact that people are memorizing shows that people hopefully are finding it helpful and easier to do it in that way. So during the running of this course, I mentioned some of the questions and things that happened in the class and to my wife. And I mentioned to her, or asked her at least one question with regard to who is in this particular way. And it was with the sakta. And then I told her at the end that sakta will be for Hamza. Hamza reads with sakta. And it just struck my mind that there was the rhyme in that. Hamza reads with sakta, which makes it a bit easy to remember. Hamza reads with sakta. So like we had a poem on the different names of the Qur'an. Just last night I was thinking, and this morning as well, and actually just composed some lines in terms of the applications. So hopefully those of you that found the first poem easy, hopefully you might benefit from this as well. I only did a few lines, looking only at the unique applications. Remember to have the book looking at the unique applications, where there's one particular application linked just to one Qari or Rawi, and after that the combined. So I've restricted myself currently to looking at just the singular applications. So you have the summary, right, in the book, and you don't have time now to go through. I don't like to go through it again, but you can go through it on your own, inshallah, and that's all that you need to focus on. I know some people are a bit stressed and worried about the quiz that's going to come up, but I'll speak about it now afterwards. So that's just what you need to focus on. It's just 2 pages or maybe 3 pages. That's all you need to study, all you need to learn in terms of preparation. But in addition, if you want, you can try and maybe learn this over here. Hopefully this will maybe make it a bit easier. So when somebody is reading for Khalaf, Mia idgham without gunna is enough. Khalaf and Hamza will have idgham without gunna in the ya and the waw. Obviously, the poem is not going to specify all of those details, but it was specified in the book. Khalaf is Khalaf and Hamza, idgham without gunna, referring to idgham without gunna in the ya and the waw. Mad badal and mad leen, followed by taghlib and talqiq, together with naql, then warsh is the one that you seek. Again, over here, you should know by now that taghlib is referring to the lam, fullness of the lam. Talqiq here will be talqiq of the ra. Okay, so those are the unique applications for warsh. And what I've done here is bolded the applications and the name. So badal, leen, taghlib, talqiq, naql, all 5 is for warsh. Ibdal of the hamza and idgham kabir, so easy. And surely you'll know that it is susi that you see. Again, we started off the book by looking at the ashra sughra via the sab'a. So ibdal of the hamza is not only for susi, we know now that's also for Abu Ja'far, but the combination of ibdal and idgham kabir will be only susi via the ashra sughra. Before a hamza, hamza reads with sakta. On a pronoun ha, ak reads with sila. So hamza with the sakta. The pronoun ha is the ha al-damir. And who reads with sila? Who is IK?
Ibn Kathir, Sheikh. Ibn
Yes,
Kathir.
IK is referring to Ibn Kathir, my wife's terminology. When stopping in the ta marbuta and imala, you then hear, then know that this is the qira'ah of Kisa'i, oh my dear. Ta marbuta, imala in it, it is only for Kisa'i. Imala ta marbuta is specific to Kisa'i. Again, after today's lesson, you know that that is specific to him only by the ashara sughra. By the ashara kubra, it will also be for Hamza. When you are reading for Hisham, what you will hear is Ibrahim. When you are reading for Shu'bah, what will then be heard is Rulwan. So Hisham will have Ibrahim, Shu'bah will have Rulwan. Those are consistent Farshi changes for them. Okay, so it doesn't cover everything, but it covers all of the unique applications. All of the applications we did in the chapter covering the unique applications, these 5 lines will cover that, and there's just 1 line over here for the consistent Farshi changes. Could have added maybe more, could have maybe gone into the combined applications as well. But you can let me know what you think. You can message me, inshallah, if you think that would be something beneficial. And maybe before I complete the 2nd edition of this book, I can maybe add some more verses, inshallah. But for now, I think this will be enough. So at the end of the book is the ijaza. Basically just says that you have learned the book from me and I give you ijaza in it. But as I said, to get the ijaza, there are conditions. The first condition is that you have to have attended and completed the entire course, be present for all the 12 lessons that we have done. If you're not present for any of them, it's fine if you have at least watched the recording. Okay, so the ideal would have been to be present for all the live recitations, all the live classes. Obviously, that may be a bit difficult for some people, maybe they missed out, so not to deny them. The recordings are there, so if you just watch the recording, then you can meet the first criterion. And the second one is to take the quiz. And I'm using the word quiz, not test, because there's different connotations, right? When you hear test, you think of something that's difficult, something that's stressful, but a quiz is something fun. You don't put yourself in a position where you go for a test, but out of choice, you'll opt to do a quiz. So the quiz is not to catch you out or to make things difficult for you, just to see whether you've learned or not. And alhamdulillah, there have been some of you that have been participating in class, and every week we start by playing a recitation, asking you who it is, and that's basically what the quiz is about. There will be 10 different recitations that you need to listen to, and for each one simply identify which qari or rawi it is. And we've been doing that all the time, and that is actually the objective of this particular course. So it's basically just for those people that have been silent participants. There's over 10 people over here in the course, but for some people, they haven't answered any question, neither on the mic nor in the chat. Some people have just been watching via YouTube, so I don't even know who they are. So just for those people, for me to see whether they've actually learned or not. Okay, so those people that have been answering the questions, I'm comfortable actually with giving you the ijaza, even without having you take the test. But just to be fair, I'm gonna let everybody do the test or the quiz, inshallah. So it's not to catch you out, just to see whether you've learned. And to make it a bit easy, for example, Ibn Kathir, we know the 2 rawis, and we've mentioned some minor details on how to separate them, but we're just going to look at Ibn Kathir. So you don't have to separate into Bazi and Kumbul. The same with Kisa'i, he has Abu al-Harith and Duri, and you've learned how to separate between them, but in the quiz, it will just be Kisa'i. So it's not something to worry about, not something to stress about. Hopefully it should be fun, inshallah. My plan was to do the recordings last night. So immediately now after the class, I could have shared the link with you and you could take the test immediately. That unfortunately I didn't have time to complete it. So I'm going to do it now, inshallah. After this class is ended, I'm going to immediately, inshallah, do the recording and share the link with you. So if you want to, you're confident, you feel you know what's going on, you can immediately take the quiz, inshallah. Maybe in the time I'm doing the recording and just revise what we've covered today. Not the last chapter on the Ashra Kubra, but the one on Khalaf al-Ashir. You need to know up until that point in the book. The quiz will cover all of that content of the book. If you want to, you don't need to take it immediately. you have from tonight, Tuesday night, up until Saturday night. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I think that's enough time. If you've missed out any lessons, you can use that time to watch the recordings. If you feel unsure about any of the topics, you can revise it, go over it. And I said, just focus on the summary, which is just 2 pages, so not a lot to study from. If you have any queries, anything you're uncertain about, you can use these days to maybe message me and ask about that. But by Saturday night, midnight, then I will close the form that we'll have to respond to, because obviously I need to start preparing the ijazat for those of you who have taken the test. If you don't want to take the test, but you have attended all the classes, then you have the option of getting a shahada, a certificate of attendance, but you need to message me to let me know if you want that, inshallah, that you've attended all the classes, but you don't want to take the test, then you can get a certificate of attendance. For those of you that are going to take the quiz, inshallah, everybody that passes will get the ijazah, but it will only be physical printed hard copies for those that will be attending the jalsa on Sunday the 5th at the masjid, inshallah. If you are overseas, and obviously I can't give it to you physically, so I'll send you the soft copy. If you are here in Cape Town, but you're not going to be coming, then also I'll just send you the soft copy, inshallah. So that's why it's important to let me know whether you'll be attending the physical jalsa at the masjid, inshallah, so that I can prepare the ijazah beforehand, inshallah. Are there any questions on the quiz? Okay, so alhamdulillah, that's the end of the course. We have a dua at the end. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من أن نشرك بك شيئا نعلمه ونستغفرك لما لا نعلم. Oh Allah, indeed we seek your protection from knowingly associating anything with you, and we seek your forgiveness from what we are unaware of. We should do everything we do sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with ikhlas. That's the only way that our deeds can be rewarded. There are people that do many deeds, and unfortunately, unwittingly, unknowingly, they're doing it out of ostentation, out of show, out of riyah. And of Qiyamah, they think they can get rewarded, but they will be punished instead. And there's a scary hadith that says that the first one will be a qari of the Quran. First one that will be brought before and have to be undergoing this will be a qari of the Quran. So even though we try our best to be free of that, we can never truly be free of it. That's why we make this dua. This is a masnoon dua. It comes from a hadith, as you can see over here. This is the dua that the Prophet ﷺ taught us to protect ourselves from riyah. We're going to be free from it. So hopefully we just make this dua and ask Allah Ta'ala to make us free from it. And that's why we started the hadith with إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. The hadith is at the start of the book, and this dua also from hadith is at the end of the book. So hopefully we start with the correct intention, we end with the correct intention as well. And tamma bihamdillah, it's been completed with the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر